Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is your boy Mike McFarland. For those that don't know me, I am the president, founder, co-president, founder, technologist of 3MG, otherwise known as Mike McFarland Marketing Group, but prefer 3MG. Short form is better. Welcome to Mike Versus. And for those that have joined in the past, thanks for joining again. Really cool that we're getting some folks that are taking time out of their day. I know everyone's super busy these days because a lot of my clients are super busy. And I'm assuming that a lot of my clients are a lot like you, very busy. So thanks for taking the time for joining me today. I really do appreciate it. Let's maybe talk a little bit about what Mike Versus is for any folks that haven't been here before. So Mike Versus was originally a concept that I wanted to take to YouTube. Ooh, hit the computer. Um, and there is a post or a video up on YouTube of Mike Versus where we talk about building a welcome program in all of the 4 big marketing automation platforms from a B2B enterprise standpoint. I know there's more. We're talking about the core 4: Eloqua, Marketo, HubSpot, and Pardot. And I made this video, put it up on YouTube, and it was a lot of fun. It's a lot of work. Editing videos is a lot of work. And I'm a busy guy. And I was finding a hard time to go through and actually not just record the video, but then edit the video and all of that. So I thought, let's take a step back. Let's make this easy. Let's do it live, which maybe is not the easier way of doing this. I have no idea, but I'm doing it live. I find it easier. I find it a lot more authentic. You're going to get the real me, this guy. And we're going to talk about some cool shit. So today, we're talking about automation and automation capabilities between the core 4, the big 4, whatever we want to call them, between Eloqua, Marketo, HubSpot, and Pardot. And now when I think about automation, it's part of the word marketing automation. So typically when you buy one of these platforms, you're buying these platforms to do some of this automation. There's a few things that I personally look for in a platform when it comes to automation. It's not just campaign automation. It's not just being able to send an email automatically or things like that. That's table stakes. It's also a lot of things around data management. So being able to do some data augmentation, some data cleanliness, being able to integrate with other applications to do things automatically. Like, perfect example is if you're using Zoom and you want to be able to register people who register for a webinar through a form in your marketing automation platform, being able to automatically capture and then pass that information over to a platform like Zoom, for example. So automation is not just the sake of sending out an email or things like that. There's a lot more to it. And I'm going to hold any personal bias. I don't have a lot of personal bias towards some of these platforms in terms of automation. They all do things fairly similarly, but in a very different way. So we're going to walk through that today. So for those of you who maybe haven't seen what it's like to build something in Engagement Studio and Pardot, or build something on the campaign canvas or the program canvas in Eloqua, you're going to get to see how that looks firsthand today. I'm not going to go into all the nth details. We'd be here for hours, and I've only scheduled this for an hour. I'm hoping it'll take about 30 to 40 minutes so everyone gets some time back in their day. And yeah, if you have questions, I think I have a chat here. I've never seen chat questions come up before, so I don't know if they actually do or not. But if you do have questions, feel free to DM me on LinkedIn or leave a comment below this post. And if I don't see it during the live today, I will get back to you later on. So without further ado, let's jump in and start looking at some of these different types of capabilities when it comes to automation. And so I'm going to start with HubSpot. Let me get my screen shared here. And bloop. Nope. Bloop. There we go. This is a workflow in HubSpot. Now, what I'm actually showing you is what I created as part of the Welcome Nurture mic verses that I did a few months ago that you can find conveniently on YouTube on the 3MG YouTube channel. You'll find this on here afterwards too. But this is a very basic workflow in the sense that it does some of the basic things that I would expect a workflow to do. You have enrollment criteria, or you have an audience, or you have a trigger. You have something that's going to pull people into your workflow. Now, every platform can be a little bit different when you're going through and creating those options in terms of how to pull people in. Sometimes it's done based on contact data. Sometimes it's based on activity data. Sometimes it's based on lead score. Sometimes it's based on if you submit a specific form or do something like that. You can do all of that within HubSpot. And depending on what apps you have integrated with HubSpot as well, you can actually go through. And in this case here, in my instance of HubSpot, I don't have any apps installed. So but if you do have apps installed, some of those apps allow you to actually reference them directly as part of the opportunity to bring people into your workflow. So the idea here is that you're constantly looking in the database for people that specifically meet a certain type of criteria, or you're looking for people in the database. It doesn't have to be in real time, but just meet a criteria at a certain point in time so that you can bring them in. And so having that functionality to do that, I think is table stakes. And you'll see that that's pretty much table stakes across the core four here. So I can go through in HubSpot, I can select contact properties, company properties, deal properties, activity properties. Basically, if HubSpot's capturing it, you can pretty much segment on it and use that as an opportunity to find people that meet that criteria that you want to bring people in. Now, when you bring people in, there's typically two things that are going to happen in any sort of automation. And again, you're going to see this when we look at Eloqua and Marketo and Pardot as well. You typically will want something called a condition, or an if there, or an if then statement, or a decision rule, or a trigger. Trigger is actually a word used in Pardot. It's also used in HubSpot for very different reasons, but you'll see what they mean. But that decision criteria is usually meant to see, okay, well, someone's come in, do they meet certain criteria to have X execute, or have this action go, or go down a different part of the workflow. In this scenario here, I don't have one built in, but you can see here, we can use this if then branch to basically put those conditions in. So if you want something to happen to somebody down one path versus another, you can easily code that, or not really code, configure that directly within HubSpot here. And again, you'll notice that the criteria that we see here is very similar to the trigger criteria that we saw here as well. So again, you'll have those opportunities to use all the information that HubSpot's capturing to go through and decide if you want someone to go down a certain path. An example of this could be, I want to take people that have titles, so I'm going to pull them into the workflow, and I want people who have a title that contains director to go down one path versus people who have a title of manager to go down another path to have different actions happen. Speaking of actions, that's pretty much what this entire workflow is. It's just a series of actions that happen. Oh, and we do have a decision logic, which I'll walk through at the bottom here. These actions here can be meant to be used in a few ways. They can be marketing actions. So maybe we're sending an email automatically. Maybe we're sending an SMS message, sending something out to our audience that we've pulled in. That's typically what I would look at as kind of like a marketing action. And then you're going to have system actions. And system actions are more things that maybe us as marketing operation professionals would consider to be more important. These are the things of like putting delays before something happens, triggering integration events with your CRM. If you're in HubSpot, maybe you don't need to do that because you're not integrated with Salesforce, but if you are, you can. And I know that there are other CRMs too, but for the purposes of today, we're just going to focus on Salesforce. You have the opportunity to go through and have these actions happen operationally to help support what happens in this workflow. So we have the marketing actions, which directly affect the people that we're pulling in. And then we have the operational actions, which are more the things that are going to be keeping the workflow moving the way that you expect it to move and moving people down the workflow the way that you expect as well. So in this scenario here, I've got a wait step where basically I'm saying, okay, we're going to pull people in, we're going to wait it in, then we're going to send an email. Now, you'll notice between each of these steps, there's this plus sign. So what this allows you to do is go and add additional criteria if you see fit. Maybe you want to add some decision logic after this 1 day hold. Maybe you want to enroll them in another workflow. Maybe you want to send a Slack notification. Maybe you want to add them to a list. You have these options within HubSpot. And again, I'm not going to go through all the options. These are what you see on my screen is what you get out of the box when you have this version of HubSpot. But again, as you're installing apps or installing different apps within HubSpot, you're going to see some of those actions appear here as well. But really what this mix of actions is again, it's between the marketing actions and kind of those operational actions. And HubSpot does a really good job of offering both. I think as someone in marketing operations, I enjoy the operational elements of using HubSpot from a workflow perspective. It allows me to go through and manipulate data, allows me to go through and segment and filter data so that people go down a certain path. It allows me to ensure that people are going down the right area or the right notifications are going out. A lot of good stuff in HubSpot workflows. And you'll notice that this workflow here, very visual, and this one's very linear, but basically this can start to expand out as you start adding in some decision rules and you have people going down one path versus another path, kind of like what you see down here. So you can imagine, depending on the complexity of what you're trying to build, you might have a very big, wildly workflow. I don't know any other term to kind of describe it, but the nice thing with the workflow editor here is that because it is a very kind of visual workflow, you can kind of follow the path as to where people will go. There's also testing functionality in here as well. So you can actually test to see how people would flow down a workflow without the actions actually happening. So you're not manipulating any data or you're not triggering off any sort of marketing communications or things like that. And so lots of really cool things you can do within HubSpot workflows. This is the primary automation element directly within HubSpot. There are other things that you can use for automation, but this is where you're going to be building potentially lead scoring workflows. I know you can do lead scoring out of the box in Fields and HubSpot, but I've also got clients that have used workflows to do scoring instead because you can add some more complexity. This is where you're going to be running your nurtures. You could potentially be doing lead routing out of here. You could be doing basic one-off email campaigns out of here. Workflows are where you're going to be doing the most of your automation when it comes to marketing automation in HubSpot. So if you have any questions on HubSpot, I'm not going to go any deeper than that. Feel free to leave them in the comments below, or you can leave again, I don't think I have chat turned on for this. Maybe one day I will. But for right now, we don't have chat turned on. So if you have any comments or questions about HubSpot workflows, you can leave them down in the comments here. Let's jump into our next platform, which is Eloqua. Hi, Eloqua. How's it going? What I'm showing you here is the campaign canvas. Now, in Eloqua, there are, I'm going to say 3 primary automation elements or automation capabilities in Eloqua. You have your campaign canvas. The campaign canvas is really meant to help execute and run your marketing campaigns. And again, the way that the campaign canvas works is it can expand a lot like a HubSpot campaign. But the difference with this is that Eloqua is all drag and drop. Whereas if I go back into HubSpot, it's modular, but it's very visual. So you can still kind of see how everyone's moving down. So in Eloqua, basically we've got some of the exact same functionality. We have our segment or our audience. This is basically where we go and we define how we want to pull people into our campaign and the frequency that we want to be able to pull people into the campaign. So if you want people to come in every day, if you want people to come in every hour, if you want people to come in when they do a specific activity, you can do that here within Eloqua. You can do the same thing in HubSpot as well. So you build your segment, you build your audience, you define who you want to be able to pull in, and then you can pull them in. Very much like HubSpot, we have the basic kind of decision logic that you can add in. So this is the kind of those if-then statements. So if you've clicked through an email, if your title is equal to this, if you exist in your CRM, those are those if-and statements. And that's basically what you see here. You can see in this sample workflow that I've built, I've got a clicked email. So we're basically going through and checking that someone clicked through an email. And then if you did, you go down one path. If you didn't, you go down another path. Exact same thing within HubSpot as well. And then you have your actions. So basically what you see here, we have things like wait steps and we have things like email triggers, or not triggers, email actions. And much like in HubSpot, if you've got different apps installed from the app, this is the app marketplace, app cloud. I can't remember what it's called in Eloqua. That's really bad. But from the app store in Eloqua, you would have some of those options to include in here as well as part of your campaign canvas. Now, you recall a few minutes ago, I mentioned that Eloqua kind of has 3 automation elements. So the campaign canvas is really meant for just that. It's meant for doing campaign operations. So basic things around email and nurture. That's really where you're going to live in here. Now, we also have the program canvas. So let's bring up the program canvas. You'll notice that it looks very similar to the campaign canvas, and it is, but it's also very different in the sense that this is meant to be much more operational. This is where you're going to potentially be doing things not like lead scoring, because you've got a lead scoring module within Eloqua, but you could build lead scoring external of that directly within the program canvas. Maybe you're doing things like a contact washing machine, or you're doing things with data augmentation. You have the opportunity to do that directly within the program canvas here. And so we don't have all the same options in the campaign canvas as we do in the program canvas. We're not sending emails out of here. You'll notice it's a lot more operational. We're adding people to lists. We have a lot of the same if-then criteria, or Eloqua likes to call them decision rules, to see if people are meeting certain pieces of criteria that we've defined. And you can drag those in and connect all the dots to make everything work nice and fluid together. But you're not going to be executing campaigns out of here. That's not what this is meant to do. This is really meant for the MOPS nerd, like us, like folks that are watching, to go and build the stuff that nobody really sees, but is really important to have running in the background to make sure that your data is nice and clean. Very nice. And then we're going to kick it a little old school here. We're going to head over into Program Builder. Now, for those that remember Eloqua 9, this is Program Builder. It's basically Visio, and it's the same idea as the campaign canvas and program canvas in the sense that it's a very visual editor. You can go through and let me see if I can find a basic one here to show you. Here's one. This one's based on companies. Again, very visual. We have actions defined within our steps. We have decisions within the program as well. Those decisions check to see if people meet certain criteria or don't meet certain criteria. And then we don't have one on here, but you can add what's in Program Builder called a feeder, where basically you can add people to a step, and you can determine whether or not you're using something like a shared filter or a shared list or a specific activity to pull people in. No one really uses Program Builder anymore. It's there, at least for me, it's there. I haven't built in Program Builder in years. So really am living on the campaign canvas and the program canvas here. So again, when it comes to automation within Eloqua, you have the program canvas, you have the campaign canvas, and you kind of have Program Builder, but let's not talk about that one. You have these two canvases to go and build out all the automation that you need with that core functionality, with the core things that you really need to build proper automation. Ways to define your audience or how you're going to pull people in, ways to go through and determine what path or what actions people can take based on decisions that are being made on the data. And then you have the actions themselves that happen based on people meeting certain criteria or flowing down certain paths of a workflow. So again, very similar to HubSpot in the sense that it can get a little big, it can get a little messy, depending on how much you have going on in there. For folks that do build really big, messy workflows in Eloqua, at least from my experience, I would recommend splitting them out. It's so hard to troubleshoot something when you can't see any white space, which I've seen campaigns and programs in Eloqua before where you can't even see the background. It's a cluster of actions and decisions and multiple entry points and all that sort of fun stuff. It can get a little wildly. So split things out. Make life easier for yourself when it comes to troubleshooting. But also use this as any of these tools are great as whiteboards too. Eloqua, you can obviously drag and drop things on. HubSpot, you can go and you can bring things in. Same with Pardot, same with Marketo. Marketo is going to look a little bit different, which you'll see. But you've got the opportunities to go through and kind of plan out how you do stuff before you actually automate anything. So kind of a cool secondary use case is to kind of treat it as like a little whiteboard to go through and do stuff. That's Eloqua. One thing I'll say too with Eloqua is on the campaign canvas, if you're integrated with Salesforce, and I'm not knock on wood, I feel like this is still the same functionality. It's been, in all honesty, it's been a few years since I've done some work within Eloqua. But when you build a campaign in Eloqua, it automatically creates a campaign in Salesforce. If you have Salesforce as your CRM integrated with Eloqua, which is pretty cool. Same thing can happen in Marketo when you create a Marketo. I believe you can create in Salesforce as well. Can't do that in HubSpot. I don't think you can do that with things like Engagement Studio and Pardot as well. But if you're looking for some of those little things that, like, if you do something one place, what happens downstream, something to consider here as well with Eloqua. So that's Eloqua. Very, again, similar to HubSpot. If you have any questions on Eloqua specifically, let me know in the comments. Or if you're an Eloqua guru, if you're a HubSpot guru, if you're a Marketo guru, if you're a Pardot guru, I know it's not called Pardot anymore, but I will always call it Pardot. Feel free to jump in and help the community out. I think that's the cool thing I'm finding out about kind of marketing ops in 2023 is that it's very collaborative. Everyone wants to help each other and learn from each other. I am by no means the only person that knows this stuff. And there are things that I don't know. Maybe there are different ways to do things that I don't know about either. So feel free to share your knowledge, share your experiences with folks. But this is just from my own personal experience here right now. So that is Eloqua. Let's jump into Pardot. Now, Pardot gets a little bit different with automation. I can kind of say the same thing with Eloqua a little bit, in the sense that there are different places to automate different things within Pardot. What you see on the screen right now is something called Engagement Studio. And Engagement Studio, again, it's really meant for building out those email style campaigns or programs or workflows that allow you to automate those types of communications. But then you also have things like automation rules, or you have things like page actions. And I'll talk a little bit high level about those, but I want to focus primarily on this because this is where you're going to start comparing Eloqua to Marketo to HubSpot to Pardot from an automation standpoint, is probably from something like this, even though there are other elements. And when I said the same with Eloqua earlier, Eloqua, you can automate certain things off of the back end of a form. And so, again, just another form of automation. There are different types of automation, but for the purposes of today, we're really kind of focusing on kind of that campaign-specific automation and what's available to us here. Just talking high level about automation rules and page actions. Automation rules, think of them as basically filters with an action that happens. So if someone meets a certain piece of criteria, then this action rule automatically runs and it will increment someone's score. It will add someone to a campaign. You can set a field value. It's basically a listener in the back end of Pardot that's constantly looking for things to be met and then for actions to be taken on those. Same with page actions, except page actions happen based on when you visit a specific page on your website or specific pages on your website. So if someone goes to a contact us page, maybe we want to increment their score by 5. If someone goes to another types of page, maybe we want to change their product interest to something else. You can do that all directly through page actions within Pardot as well. And you can do similar things within the other platforms. Again, it's just not a dedicated module like it is here within Pardot. Yeah. So looking at the engagement studio, you can see, again, we're looking at a sample email welcome campaign that I've built. We've got our entry criteria. So typically you're going to pull people in by a list that you've created within Pardot. And again, that list is going to have different pieces of criteria or conditions that you've put in order to pull them in. Like I mentioned in Eloqua and like I mentioned in HubSpot, you can go through and define how frequently you want people to come in, or what days or what certain time periods you want people to come in. So if you don't want to send things on weekends, if you don't want things to happen after hours, you can put some of these time delays in place or these time schedules in place to allow for that. And then much like Eloqua and much like HubSpot, we also have actions and decisions directly within Engagement Studio. Now, earlier when I was talking about HubSpot, I mentioned the word trigger. Now, HubSpot uses the word trigger as a workflow trigger to pull people in. Marketo uses the word trigger, which we'll talk about here in a second. In Pardot, we use the word trigger to evaluate or listen for when something happens. And that's really what a trigger is. It's basically someone does something, we want to trigger something to happen. You do that directly within your Engagement Studio flow in Pardot. So you can have a trigger that looks to see, did somebody click through an email within a certain time period, or within a certain time period. So in this scenario here, I'm saying anybody who has clicked any link in email to within a 3-day period. So it's constantly going to be listening for 3 days to see if this happens. If that does happen, then you'll go down one path versus another path. You could do the same thing in HubSpot. You can do the same thing in Eloqua, and you can do the same thing in Marketo as well, although it looks a little bit different in Marketo. So that's what a trigger is. It's a lot like a decision evaluation. It's a lot like a condition, but in the scenario here, we're using a trigger to go through and listen for something to happen. Now, Pardot also does offer rules or decision rules or evaluations to see does someone meet a certain piece of criteria. And again, that's going to offer a yes path and that's going to offer a no path. So depending on the criteria that you're evaluating, again, you're going to go down one path versus another path. And that's going to give you an opportunity to have different actions happen. And then you'll see down here in this simple workflow that I built here, if someone does click through a link at least one time within 3 days, I'm going to get a notification. Pretty cool. If someone doesn't click through a link after 3 days, we could add them to a list. Now, lists become important in Pardot because those are the primary ways to add people into different Engagement Studio workflows. I don't know if they call them workflows per se, but I don't want to call them just different engagement studios. So lists become important there. So adding people to lists, if you want to move people from one Engagement Studio workflow to another, use that list functionality to go through and do that. Again, actions are all going to be the actions that you have available here are all going to be based off of what you get out of the box with Pardot. If I'm going to be a little bit honest, there's a little less functionality here, I would say, with the different types of actions that you can run within Pardot versus the other marketing automation platforms. Just a personal preference. Maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe I've just looked at this the wrong way the whole time, and I'll be more than happy to kind of eat crow on that. But it does feel a little bit limited. But that being said, if you're looking to get started in marketing automation and jumpstart into marketing automation, or even if you're in the enterprise, because I've worked with enterprise clients on this platform as well, you don't have to have every single bell and whistle to be effective with your tools. Sometimes you can get it, well, most of the time you can get along with what they give you out of the box as well. So That's just my own personal opinion, but still a really powerful tool, especially when you start combining in elements like automation rules and page actions. You have all of these things kind of working in conjunction together. You can build some really cool shit. And that's Engagement Studio. Again, pretty similar to Eloqua, pretty similar to HubSpot. Maybe you're seeing a bit of a trend here with all of these marketing automation platforms. They all do things similarly, or they all have similar functionality, but they just do them slightly different. But at the end of the day, from my own personal experience of using all of these tools over the last 17 years, you can make these tools really work for you, which is really cool. And having some of this automation available. And I can only imagine how this type of automation is going to change as we start introducing more AI into things and all of that. Going to be crazy times. Going to be crazy town. Going to be crazy town. Remember Crazy Town? I'm going to take a sip of water, but remember Crazy Town, and was it Butterfly? Was that the song? Going back to my late 90s nu metal days. I still listen to nu metal, but anyway, that's Pardot here. Now, last but certainly not least is Marketo. Now, Marketo, I'm going to put an asterisk on this because they are coming out with a much more visual editor for campaign automation. And it is coming, I think it's coming this summer. So I'm really looking forward to get into that. But what you see right now is what Marketo calls a smart campaign. And smart campaigns are the primary way to go through and automate things within your instance of Marketo. Smart campaigns help with campaigns. They also help with the data side of things as well. That's actually, let me take a step back. This is the fun of doing this thing live, is that I remember things as I'm talking about it. So hopefully you don't mind me jumping back a little bit, but I'm going to try to not do that a lot. When we talk about Engagement Studio, we're really talking about this from a campaign perspective. If you're getting into things like data augmentation, there are some things you can do here from a data augmentation side of things, but you're probably going to be using automation rules for most of that, at least in my own personal experience, for like the broader type of data automation, data segmentation that you do within your marketing automation platform. You're typically going to do it out of automation rules versus your campaign deployments and your emails. You're typically going to do out of Engagement Studio. So, and the reason I say all that, because jumping back into Marketo here, is we have smart campaigns in Marketo, which are really responsible for all the automation that happens. You do have different things like streams, where you can set up nurtures based on streams that people can enter and exit out of. But for the purposes of today, we're really going to just be focusing on smart campaigns. And when we think about smart campaigns, the fun about having an Apple Watch, and maybe the scary thing, is that it's always listening, and Siri just, I don't know, thought I was talking about smart campaigns and didn't know what I was talking about. So shut up, Siri. Okay, talking about smart campaigns in Marketo here. So in smart campaigns in Marketo, you've got two basic parts. You have your smart list, which is your criteria that's going to define how people come into your smart campaign. And those are smart lists are broken out into, I'll say two sections. You have triggers. So triggers are basically like listeners. So when a certain activity happens, when a certain data value changes, or something like that, you can combine these triggers together to say, hey, this person now meets this criteria to enter this campaign. Now we want them to happen. Now we want ABC to happen. So you can use different types of triggers to pull people in. You can also use filters to pull people in. Triggers are real-time. Filters typically what you'll want to use if you're batching your smart campaigns. That's another thing I should talk about at the end. We'll talk a little bit about the frequency at which some of these automation platforms run. So with triggers, you're running in real time. Someone submits a form and you have that trigger set up within your smart campaign in Marketo. That'll trigger your flow, which is what we're going to jump to here, or your actions to happen after that criteria is met. With HubSpot, with Pardot, with Marketo, with Eloqua, you can combine different pieces of criteria to define your audience to pull people in. So in Eloqua, you create segments, which can reference filters and shared lists. In Pardot, you can create lists that reference different properties on the on the prospect record, and company record, and different activities as well. In HubSpot, you can do the same thing. You can reference contact properties, company properties, any data points that are being captured, especially if you have different apps installed. And the same thing in Marketo. You can combine all these together using different types of logic, like has done this and this and this, or has done this and has done this or this or this or this. You can do that sort of advanced logic pretty much across all these platforms. Not as much in Pardot, but definitely in Marketo, definitely in HubSpot, and definitely in Eloqua, where you can get some pretty complex entry criteria built for your smart campaigns if you need to, but the opportunities are there. In this scenario here, we're really just looking to see when a person's created in the database. That's all this flow is doing. And so I can add constraints or conditions to that as well, if I do so see fit. And these constraints and conditions will change based on the type of criteria that you're using in here as well. And so that it's pretty straightforward. Just going through and looking at to see when a person's created. And if you want to add an additional criteria, just drag it over. And you can see it becomes very linear, which is very different than when you look at Eloqua and Marketo and Pardot. Very visual, very graphical, very Visio-esque. And I know I'm dating myself by saying Visio. Very Lucid-esque or Envision-esque. In terms of how you can diagram everything out. Once someone meets all of your criteria that you've defined here, based on the triggers or filters that you've used, you can go through and move your person record, because that's what they call them in Marketo, into your flow. And the flow is where the actions within your smart campaign happen. So again, this is a very simple, welcome kind of cadence that I've set up where if someone were to meet this criteria, not all of this criteria, just this criteria, they would flow in, wait for a day, send an email, wait for 3 days, send email too. And you can see here over on the right-hand side, you have different options that you can bring into your flow in terms of how you want things to happen. Maybe you want to add someone to a Salesforce campaign. Maybe you want to sync them with Salesforce. Maybe you want to change their lead score. Maybe you want to send them an email or add them to another smart campaign. You can do all of that directly within your flow. And it's pretty powerful, at least from when it comes to understanding kind of like the scalability of doing some of the stuff within Marketo. You can do a lot of really cool shit. I don't personally like the linear kind of up-down version of this because it's not that it's hard to follow, but if you've got like conditions on steps, it can get a little bit hard to understand exactly how everything works and talks together, which is why I'm super stoked that they're solving this with a more visualized campaign editor coming out soon. Asterisks. I don't know when soon. I can't remember when exactly it's coming out, but it is coming out. So you can go through and again, you can do things like sending emails. You can have things happen directly within Salesforce. You can change program statuses, which then can change your lead status. You can do all of this stuff, and it all happens within Smart Campaigns. So when you think about automation in Marketo, your one-stop shop is Smart Campaigns for data automation, campaign automation, Salesforce automation, not directly in Salesforce, but doing things to talk to Salesforce. You can do all that directly within your Smart Campaigns within Marketo. And you'll notice here, I've got multiple Smart Campaigns that are set up to do different things. Depending on how you set things up in Marketo, you may want to split out your actions that happen. So if you want, like I've got this flow here that basically checks to see if anybody has clicked through email 2 in the past 3 days, which is a lot like what we were looking at in the other workflows that I set up. I had that decision logic. I don't have that decision logic built into the campaign that's directly responsible for sending out those emails, I have a secondary campaign set up that's specifically set up to listen for when those actions happen and then have its own distinct flow happen here as well. So I find that depending on what you're building, you may want to have separate smart campaigns for different things, all folded together nicely. Naming conventions in Marketo, wow, super important. I don't know why Chef kissed that, but you want you want naming conventions to be a big part of what you're doing in Marketo. Just a lot easier to find things and report on stuff here as well. That's any platform, but I find it especially important in Marketo. Oh boy. I think that's really what I wanted to focus on from an automation standpoint. So that's basic. Those are the basics when it comes to automation in all of these platforms. Is there more to talk about? Absolutely. Are there things that I missed? Absolutely. Is someone going to come back and troll me to say like, "Hey, Mike, you showed this, but it really means this"? Absolutely. That's cool. I want to learn. And there are certain things that I've learned over my career that I implement when I work with different clients or when I'm doing stuff for 3MG as well. And I do them in a way that I've learned to do them. But much the old saying is like in Microsoft Office, there was always 10 ways to do the same thing. It's very similar when it comes to marketing automation. There are different ways to do the same thing. Maybe you don't use Engagement Studio all the time to send emails. Maybe you use action rule or automation rules. I don't know why you would, but you could. There are so many ways to do different things. And that's really what I'm trying to showcase is the flexibility and what's possible within all of these platforms. And so if you're considering getting into a marketing automation platform, and automation is a big part of what you're looking for, hopefully this gives you a little bit of insight into how all of these platforms work, are basically the same, but very different. Or if you're a current customer of one of these companies that are using one of these platforms and you're interested in seeing what else is out there, again, hopefully this helped kind of expand your knowledge in terms of what's possible. Because at the end of the day, we want to be using the tools that best serve us and best serve our business. And we have ideas for how we want to do things. We have requirements for how we need to do things. Hopefully this gives you a little bit of that insight into what's possible within these platforms and what's similar, what's different, all of that good stuff. That's what Mike Versus is all about. That's what it's all about. It's not about shitting on platforms or different pieces of software or saying one's better than the other. We're all going to have personal biases 100%, and that's totally fair. There are folks that I talk to on a daily basis that think HubSpot is the perfect platform in the world, that think Marketo is the perfect platform in the world. People think that I think that Eloqua is the perfect platform in the world. It's not. None of these platforms are perfect. And I can say that because I've used all of them. And I can also say that because I use them all with my clients on very different projects very similar projects, but do things very differently in all of them. But I feel very fortunate that I've had the opportunity to learn how to do things on all these platforms or take ideas of how I've done stuff in Pardot and implemented in Marketo, or how I've done stuff in HubSpot and implemented in Eloqua. There's a lot of really cool learnings that you can do. And again, some of these platforms may be right for you. Some of them might not be. That's totally cool. That's the best thing about choice. So hopefully this was helpful. If you have any suggestions for what else you'd like to see me cover in a Mike Versus, let me know. Let me know if you like this format or if you'd rather see it on YouTube. Now, it's going to be on YouTube after the fact because this will post to YouTube. So if you ever want to go back and watch the replay, you can do that on LinkedIn. You can do that on YouTube as well. But would love any and all feedback. Hopefully you enjoyed this. I'm getting my wits end in terms of, not wits end. Here's another fun thing about being live is that you use the wrong terms. I'm not at my wits end with any of this. I'm learning as I go through this, not just doing this live. but also making sure that I'm focusing on the things that I believe are most important. So there will be things that I miss just because of time constraints. But if you have questions, hit them up in the comments, send me a DM on LinkedIn. More than happy to chat. And yeah, maybe we'll end it there. Actually, you know what we're going to do? I'm going to try something here really quick because we are live. I'm going to pop on LinkedIn here really quick. And I want to see if anybody has said anything. Let's take a peek-see. No. Cool. There's no comments. Awesome. Not awesome, but you know what I mean. I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. So if you have any questions, let me know. If not, until next time, until the next Mike Versus, this is Mike McFarland from 3MG. See you later, everyone.